Nebraska is known for beef, buffet, and Big Red football. But if this group of clergymen have their way, it will be known for something else.
It will be a little taste of paradise.
It is a one-of-a-kind project situated on a one-time golf course in Omaha. You might call it a powerful drive to make history on these 35 acres of land.
One would think if it can happen in Omaha, it can happen pretty much everywhere, couldn't it?
It's 3 houses of worship side by side, a mosque, a synagogue, and a church, the last of which just broke ground.
In a land called Omaha, the Jew, the Muslim, and the Christian stood as one and started a movement that changed the world.
Called the Tri-Faith Initiative, the idea began to take shape after 9/11.
I took a group of members of this congregation and we went to protect, defend the mosque.
It was an act of goodwill, leading to friendships and a dialogue between Omaha Jews, Muslims, and Christians.
We are here to learn about each other and to live as neighbors with each other without crossing any boundaries or any lines.
When Omaha's Temple Israel made plans to construct its new synagogue, it helped form the initiative. And together, the 3 faiths decided to become neighbors.
Being originally from Israel, how do you think that informed your belief that this initiative could be possible when peace in the Middle East is so elusive?
I saw complete stagnation and no movement at all in solving the Middle East issue. If you can do it in Israel, and it takes so many years in Israel, what about Omaha?
The overall project is expected to total more than $65 million. It will include a 4th building, a shared space for interfaith activities and classes to help build trust and understanding. Still, the initiative hasn't been entirely free of controversy. Some Omaha Jews have expressed private concerns about the possibility of the synagogue being targeted by radicals. And the imam concedes that many in his faith remain skeptical.
Right now they are suspicious, they are hesitant, but very soon they will find out that it's a good idea, it's a positive idea.
Reverend, paint a picture of what things look like 10 years from now.
We really represent the tip of an iceberg right now. 10 years from now, I would expect 200 Tri-Faith initiatives to be all over the world.
A bold idea in the nation's heartland to spread peace around the globe.
A cross at a Pensacola public park will be coming down after a controversial ruling today. A federal judge decided in favor of a group of people who sued the city, saying the cross is offensive to them. The local landmark stands at Bayview Park. It's been there for almost 75 years.
Overlooking the water, tucked away in the East Hill neighborhood of Pensacola, Bayview Park has been a popular spot for years. This white cross has been here for many of them, standing 34 feet high for almost 8 decades. The Bayview Cross is a piece of the city's history, but not for much longer.
Since it's in our Constitution, and in everything that we have, all our lives, that's all we've known. And now all of a sudden they're going to come in and change it. I think that's wrong. I think the law is wrong.
Lucia Greenfield remembers coming here when she was a little girl.
I think it's a disgrace. I think it's awful. It's so sad. I've been here all my life, born and raised, used to do Easter egg hunts here, and I think it's terrible.
The cross isn't just a landmark, it's also a popular spot for church services and remembrance services. The city does the upkeep, costing about $230 a year. It was built in 1969, but recently 4 people in the community filed a lawsuit against the city, saying they want the cross removed because it's a religious symbol. The order says one of them used the space near the cross on Easter for satanic purposes. The judge ruling in their favor, but not without showing his disapproval for the law. He wrote, quote, "After about 75 years, the Bayview Cross can no longer stand as a permanent fixture on city-owned property. I am aware that there is a lot of support in Pensacola to keep the cross as is, and I understand and respect that point of view, but the law is the law."
There aren't a lot of nail polish options specifically for Muslims in the US, but Orly's line of #halal paint is trying to make the beauty market more representative and inclusive. Some Muslims participate in a washing ritual before prayer, in which water must touch every part of the body. Unlike traditional nail polishes, the polishes in this line are porous, allowing the water through. The health benefits of breathable nail polish have been debated, but some say porous polish can promote good nail health. There are other beauty lines that focus on halal makeup, but the Orly Muslim Girl collaboration is different because it's a mainstream beauty brand catering to Muslims. The halal beauty industry is growing worldwide, and estimates show it will rake in more than $52 billion by 2025.
People around the world were forced to leave their homes in record numbers in 2016. A report from the UN Refugee Agency found 65.6 million people were displaced from their homes last year. That's 300,000 more people than the year before. The report tracked three types of movement: refugees, internal displacement, and asylum seekers. In 2016, 22.5 million refugees fled their home country, the highest number since the agency was founded in 1950. The UN attributes a lot of that to the uptick in the Syrian war. 12 million people in the country were forced to abandon their homes in 2016. That's more than half of the country's population. South Sudan has the fastest growing displaced population in the world after peace efforts in the country fizzled out last summer. The majority of those displaced in the sub-Saharan country are children.
Terrorists struck again in two European capitals. Early today, a man drove a truck into a crowd of Muslim worshippers in London. Several were hurt. Later, in Paris, a man slammed a car loaded with explosives into a police car.
Anti-terror investigation is underway in Paris after an armed attacker rammed a car into a police van on the Champs-Élysées. The French Interior Ministry says it was intentional and that the driver is dead. He had been on France's security watch list since 2015 due to radical Islamist ties.
A man has deliberately driven his car into a police van in the busy heart of Paris in the latest terror attack to hit the French capital. The man, who is known to security services, was killed in the incident after the Renault Megane he was driving collided with a gendarmerie van on the Champs-Élysées. Police had to break the vehicle's windows to remove the attacker after the car burst into flames.
The car contained a number of weapons and explosives which would have enabled it to be detonated. This shows once again that the threat level in France is extremely high.
Well, the mosque in Finsbury Park, near to where this morning's tragedy unfolded, has been the centre of media attention for a long time now. Let's take a look. It opened back in the late 80s as the Muslim population in the area began to grow, but since then it's been one of the biggest prayer halls in Britain. However, in the 90s, the mosque was accused of radicalism and its preachers linked to Al-Qaeda. One imam that was preaching there in 1997 was the notorious Abu Hamza. The mosque became a meeting point for various extremist figures before Hamza was jailed and then given a life sentence. There were reports of a 9/11 attacker and the so-called shoe bomber, a man who hid explosives in his shoes on an American Airlines flight in 2001, were visiting that place of worship. So embroiled in controversy, that mosque was closed in 2003 following an investigation. 2 years later, though, it was reopened under a new chairman, and since then, the new management's tried to distance itself from that radical past.
Following Russia's warning that it will view US warplanes as targets if they fly west of the Euphrates River, the US military has justified shooting down a Syrian warplane on Sunday as an act of self-defense. The plane was shot down near Raqqa after it bombed targets near US allied forces fighting ISIL on the ground.
Goes back to the only actions that we have taken against pro-regime forces in Syria, and there have been two specific incidents, have been in self-defense, and we've communicated that clearly. The confliction that we've had in place is in our mutual interest because it allows us to address what at least pro-regime forces have indicated is our common enemy, ISIS.
Syria is now a mosaic of shifting battlegrounds which can be split in four. Syrian rebel forces in pink, the Islamic State group in orange, the Syrian military in blue, and Kurdish forces in purple.
Israel's been mostly staying out of the Syrian civil war, but rebel groups on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights are now claiming that they've received funding and training from the Jewish state. The arrangement has been in place since as early as 2013, according to the Wall Street Journal, who talked to Syrian rebels as well as, quote, people familiar with Israel's thinking. The sources told the Journal that a special unit has been established in the Israel Defense Forces to oversee the operation, which is intended to keep Iranian proxies like Hezbollah away from Israel's borders. Reportedly, Fursan al-Julan, or Knights of the Golan, is even receiving around $5,000 a month in funds from Israel, while receiving nothing from the United States or other Western nations. The group spokesman is saying that Israel has stood by their side in a heroic way, and that they wouldn't have survived without Israeli assistance. Fusan al-Julan has a fighting force of around 400. They managed to open up a channel with Israel when injured numbers of the groups begged for help from Arabic-speaking Israeli soldiers on the border. The wounded fighters were taken to medical treatment in Israel, where they allegedly made real contact.
The Israeli Prime Minister has warned Iran not to threaten Tel Aviv after Tehran fired missiles at Daesh positions in Syria. Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is constantly monitoring Iran's activities in the region. Netanyahu accused the Islamic Republic of trying to establish itself in Syria.
Judging from the statement released by the Royal Australian Air Force, looks like the reason why Australia has decided to halt the airstrikes in Syria is because they no longer feel that the situation there is safe. Take a listen to exactly what the statement said.
As a precautionary measure, Australian Defence Force strike operations into Syria have temporarily ceased. A decision on the resumption of ADF air operations in Syria will be made in due course.
Well, the reason why they view the situation there as not safe, it's because this agreement that the U.S. and Russia has signed back in October 2015, an agreement that ensures there will be no collisions or dangerous incidents in airspace over Syria. Well, that agreement has been halted. Russia has announced yesterday to stop cooperating with the U.S. military in Syrian airspace.
Any aircraft belonging to the U.S.-led coalition detected in the skies west of the Euphrates River, where the Russian Air Force is operating, will be tracked as targets by Russian air defense systems.
The conflict between NATO allies Germany and Turkey continues to escalate after Berlin announced plans to come good on its threat to withdraw troops from the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey and relocate them to Jordan.
Until the end of June, our flight plans as part of the anti-ISIL coalition are set. After that, we'll be transferring our tanker aircraft as quickly as possible to Jordan.
Well, the main role that Germany has been providing as part of the coalition fighting against ISIS has been reconnaissance air surveillance. Well, the Tornado fighter jets that carry out those reconnaissance flights won't be fully operational from their new base in Mufarek Santi in Jordan until October, we hear. That's because of the equipment moving from Turkey over to Jordan will take that amount of time.
Reuters has reported that Qatar held military exercises with Turkish troops on Monday, demonstrating one of its few strong alliances after 2 weeks of ostracism and economic isolation imposed by neighbors, which accused the U.S. ally of supporting terrorism. Qatar's state-funded pan-Arab news channel Al Jazeera showed footage of a column of armored personnel carriers moving through the streets. It reported that additional Turkish troops have arrived in Qatar on Sunday for the exercises, although military sources in the region told Reuters the operation actually involved Turkish troops that were already present rather than new arrivals.
We begin with late developments today, the worsening horror for a mother and father from Ohio. Their son, who was just returned from North Korea with severe brain damage, has now died.
He arrived in the U.S. less than a week ago, carried off a plane suffering from extensive brain damage, more than a year since the world heard his plea for mercy.
Please save my life. Please think of my family.
In a statement today, his parents say when Otto was carried off that airplane, he looked very uncomfortable, almost anguished. But within a day, the countenance of his face changed. He was at peace. He was home, and we believe he could sense that. But he could not walk, talk, or respond to verbal commands. And today, he passed away, surrounded by his family. Since the moment their son was sentenced to hard labor for stealing a propaganda poster, the warm beers were fighting until he was released.
We're thrilled that our son is on American soil, and I'm able to talk to you on Otto's behalf, and I'm able to wear the jacket that he wore when he gave his confession.
The family clearly blames North Korea for Otto's death, saying today the awful, torturous mistreatment our son received at the hands of the North Koreans ensured that no other outcome was possible.
I just wanted to pass on word that Otto Warmbier has just passed away. He spent 1.5 years in North Korea. A lot of bad things happened. but at least we got him home to be with his parents, where they were so happy to see him, even though he was in very tough condition, but he just passed away a little while ago. It's a brutal regime, and we'll be able to handle it.
The United States has deployed 2 B-1B bombers to the Korean Peninsula to conduct a joint aerial operation with South Korean fighter jets. According to a South Korean Air Force official, the heavy bombers will conduct a joint exercise on this Tuesday with 2 of South Korea's F-15Ks to better counter North Korea's threats. The official added that the exercise is a routine drill. Washington deployed B-1Bs late last month as well, just 5 hours after Pyongyang launched a ballistic missile into the East Sea. The bombers are stationed at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam and can be deployed to the Korean Peninsula in under 2.5 hours.
He has been seen but not heard, silently watching President Trump sign orders. Jared Kushner is usually in the middle of the action, but publicly mum.
Well, thank you very much, Rudy.
Sitting at the president's side, but never a peep out of it.
Have you ever heard him speak? Seriously, what does his voice sound like?
Kushner is a guy with a Twitter account, but no tweets, a cover story in Time with no interview. He once tiptoed past his wife as she was being interviewed.
Oh, come on, Jared, come on. Come on, Jared. Oh, Jared, you can't just walk in and not say anything.
He used to.
The silent sidekick has finally found his voice. We present the actual voice of Jared Kushner.
The Department of Defense, for example, still uses 8-inch floppy disks.
It's been called the biggest human tragedy to strike Portugal in decades. But as the number of victims continues to rise, the political fallout from the ferocious forest fire is only just beginning. Questions are being asked about how ill-prepared the emergency services were in a region known for drought and wildfires. This volunteer fireman says, "We've been forgotten here. We didn't have a single piece of aerial equipment. Corpses have been on the ground for too long before being removed. After this catastrophe, we must think seriously and change the civil protection authorities." There's also been criticism over the lack of a coordinated response and the government's delay in calling for help, especially from the EU's specialised crisis management team in Brussels. We're aware that a member state cannot cope alone with the natural disasters that unfortunately occur. In the summer season, there are usually forest fires, especially in the countries of southern Europe, hence the importance of this additional aid by the EU member states. These medium-term plans provide an analysis of what's needed. The government has insisted the first response by the emergency services was swift and that additional firefighters were quickly mobilised, but critics say what was missing was a modernised warning system.
Okay, so when Amazon takes over Whole Foods, your purchases may be checked out by a robot.
Really?
What do you think of that?
If they're fast, sure.
So reportedly they're going to reduce the number of cashiers and replace them with a mobile payment system. That would be the same that's used at that experimental Amazon store in Seattle that I'm dying to go to. And also, Amazon might also lower Whole Foods prices to make it competitive with Walmart. Obviously, that's a big reason that this was such a big story last week, is the competition with Walmart.
Be organic food cheaper, essentially, and often delivered. But some of those Amazon Go stores, the ones they're testing in Seattle, they work with just 3 humans in the entire store, 3 human employees.
I like it as a consumer, angle here, but the job losses is actually kind of bothersome.
To celebrate the upcoming total solar eclipse, the U.S. Postal Service is releasing its first thermochromic stamp. The stamp reacts to heat. Touching it reveals an image of the moon, and as it cools, it turns back to black. The back of the stamp shows the path of the eclipse across the continental U.S. It mimics what we can expect to see during the celestial event. As the moon passes in front of the sun, it should cast a shadow about 70 miles wide. The last time a total solar eclipse swept across the U.S. from coast to coast was almost 100 years ago.